So there's two parts to determining a distribution of a business asset. The first part is you have to figure out actually the value of the business. And the second part is you need to figure out what is the percentage that your client will actually achieve or the other client will pay out in terms of that percentage. So in New York, it's pretty rare to have a 50-50 split of a business asset. So we should be clear about that. The range is anywhere from, I would say, 20% to probably 40%. Sometimes someone works in a business who is the non-titled spouse to the business. So they may be actually a big factor in the business, and then maybe they reach something like 45%, and in that rare case, 50%. But you're usually not talking about a 50-50 split of a business asset. And you're not talking about getting the business asset usually. You're talking about a payout, a lump sum payout, whether it be over time, perhaps with interest, or whether it be a lump sum payout that you will receive at the time that you settle your case or after a trial of the matter. Now, it's complicated. You may need a forensic accounting firm or an accounting firm who can value the business. That's something that needs to happen. And there will be various documents that have to be produced, whether you own the business or the other person is actually looking to get their share of the business. There will be a lot of production in terms of documentation. I mentioned earlier general ledgers, for example. You will be actually asked to produce the general ledgers probably in native format so that it will be much easier for the accounting firm to go through it. And you will be asked to produce loan documents, financial statements, credit card statements, bank accounts. You may be actually asked to have partners come in and have depositions. These are all things that could happen in order to value the business. What the valuator is trying to do is to figure out what the value would be if two willing parties were actually buying and selling the business. And they're looking at normalizing certain things when they're doing this. So they are normalizing, for example, the expenses of the business. You may have a situation where people are paying personal expenses out of the business. Well, that wouldn't necessarily be a normal expense of a business. And so they will be deducting those actual expenses that are being paid out of the business. You may be paying rents to someone who is a family member who may own the property on which the business is actually being conducted. The rents may be higher than what is normal. And so you may be looking at normalizing the rents. You may normalize the salaries and the compensation of both the owner and some of the other employees. So there may be a whole host of things that are done, including discount rates that are taken, including figuring out what a cap rate is. So there is a whole host of things that are done to value the business. Now you have the second part. What was the other spouses, the non-titled spouse to the business, what was their contribution? It can be direct or indirect. So did they help raise the family while someone was out building the business? That's important. Did they go to the dry cleaners, cook the meals, pick up the kids, do all of that so that someone actually could be working in their business and traveling for business and taking out clients for business? Did they socialize with people in the business and clients that would be important to the business? These are all things that we look at in terms of contribution. So did they actually work in the business? Well, that's a direct contribution. And so the percentage that you may be entitled to because of a direct contribution will get higher than for indirect contributions. But they're all contributions. And so you want to figure out what was the assistance level of the non-titled spouse in this business and then come to some agreement on percentage. In New York, it's very rare for the non-titled spouse to actually have an ownership interest in the business after the divorce. It's very rare because it's really, you want to separate the parties as much as you can, and having them be in the same business, particularly when it may be the non-titled spouse who didn't work in the business and really doesn't understand how the business works and can't add in a meaningful way to the business, it would be best to separate out the spouses. Therefore, we have to figure out what is the percentage of the value that the non-titled spouse will receive at the end of a divorce. In New York, it's usually not 50%. I'm going to tell you that. I know that's disappointing to some people, but unless you're really involved in the business per se on a day-to-day basis, or the marriage is very long, or there's some other reason, it's likely not to be 50%. It could be anywhere from 20% to 40%. Sometimes if you've been involved in the business to some degree, maybe it's 45% if the marriage is long. But essentially, for the non-titled spouse, there's going to be a payout, and the other spouse, the spouse who owns the business, is going to receive the business so that they can carry on.